Hello everybody, Horrorman Mike here. Today I am doing a book review. This is the first book review on this channel. And this is not the normal kind of content I do, but I wanted to put a spotlight on a particular title. A title that is a role-playing supplement that is possibly one of the most thought-provoking, but also one of the most harrowing reads I've ever had as a teenager, or an adult for that matter. One of the scariest roleplay supplements I've ever gotten my hands on. Today we are talking about Charnel Houses of Europe, the Shoah, which is the Holocaust-themed supplement book for Wraith the Oblivion. Before we go any further in this, yes, we will be discussing the Holocaust and the ultimate human tragedy that is that period in time. I'm going to try to skip over the nitty-gritty details, but it's a discussion that brings out the worst in humanity, and it can get rather ugly. So, if that's not the kind of review you want to watch today, you can click off of this video, come back to it a later time, or skip this video entirely. That's up to you. Still here? Okay, great. So, because this is not the kind of content that I normally do on this channel, let's start with broad strokes. What is a role-playing game? A role-playing game, or a tabletop role-playing game, is a social game in which people get together and they create fictitious characters. They speak as these characters would speak. You narrate their actions, and typically there's a lot of dice rolling and comparing to characters' attributes on a sheet as to the pass-fail outcome of any action that they wish to take in the game world. If anybody out there has even heard of the game Dungeons and Dragons, what you picture in your head when you think of Dungeons and Dragons, that is a role-playing game. Now, what is Wraith the Oblivion? Wraith the Oblivion is a role-playing game that was originally published in 1994. What is considered to be the penultimate second edition came out in 1996. Charnel Houses of Europe was published in March and April of 1997. Wraith the Oblivion is a game that takes place in our world. Well, a slightly darker version of our world. In the world of Wraith the Oblivion, ghosts do exist. They exist alongside us. One could be right next to me right now. But they need certain powers and abilities to breach the Shroud of Death to be able to affect the world of the living. Not every person who ever dies becomes a wraith. Wraiths stick around because they have some kind of regret, some kind of unfinished business. Perhaps you died too soon. Perhaps there was a goal that you had in life that you didn't get to accomplish. For whatever reason, you have something in you. And this is what I think differentiates, for me, how Wraith the Oblivion is different from other role-playing games. Is you're not playing superheroes. You're not playing people with a ton of guns that are action heroes or collecting superpowers and things like that. You're just ordinary people. But there is something in you. There is some kind of passion that you have that when death comes for you, you stare right into the blackness of oblivion and you say, no, I will not go gentle into that good night. I have unfulfilled business. That is why I feel like Wraith the Oblivion is different. It's also different from a technical standpoint in that in most role-playing games, when your character dies, the game is over. You make a new character and you just go about the game world. Wraith the Oblivion takes the polar opposite approach in that the game begins with your character's death and then makes you go through that character's life, or the remnants of that character's life. It's a game that makes you ask the big questions like, what is important to you? What are you so passionate about that you would defy death? And that's why Wraith the Oblivion is like special to me, or it's inspirational to me. This game got a bad reputation as being like too dark, too drab, too depressing. And okay, yeah, there are aspects of that, but it's really a ripe role-playing supplement, and you can do a lot with it. You could watch Brandon Lee's The Crow and then read The Risen and play a game off of that. For years and years and years, I have wanted to do a Doomslayers Into the Labyrinth game based on the movie Aliens. You can have a ton of fun with Wraith the Oblivion. However, when it comes to Charnel Houses of Europe, the Shoah, this book needs a sense of seriousness and gravity. You can have fun with those other supplements, that's fine, but if you're going to read or even use Charnel Houses of Europe in your game, you need to be ready that this book is absolute zero bullshit. It is not fun, but it was a very eye-opening read for me. It delved into details of the Holocaust that I did not know about. I was taught about the Holocaust in the American educational system. Take that as you will. We were taught Holocaust bad, Nazis bad, war bad, America good, and that's it. We took a test and we moved on to, I think we talked about the ethics of dropping the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, but then we just moved on. And yeah, we read samples of the Diary of Anne Frank, we watched scenes from Schindler's List, but that doesn't really hit the gravity of what happened, and it certainly spares some of the bloody nitty-gritty details that this book actually gets into. This book got into things that I never learned in history class, either because we didn't have time, or even more likely, the people teaching the content didn't know the depths of the horrors of what went on. The introduction of this book lists as sources no less than 30, count them, 30 other books that were read and cited as sources that went into creating Charnel Houses of Europe. It was very well researched. It was very well thought out. This was not an impulse project. This was not a cool what-if scenario. This was not a cash grab. This is a passion project from the developers, and it was very, very well thought out. You can tell in Wraith the Oblivion, which was published years beforehand, on page 74, you can read a sidebar that has the seeds that would eventually grow to be Charnel Houses of Europe. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the sample goes like this. It makes me shiver to the bone to recall what I saw of the restless during the Second World War. Along with the legions of men, there began to appear in the Shadowlands scores upon scores of other wraiths from the other realms of Poland and Russia, whole families of men and women and babes and elder grandparents. They came and came. It would not stop coming. Breaching the shroud, naked, heads shaved, scarred and cut and whipped and broken. Their arrowy shrieks pierced through me. There was an abhorrence in the air when they came, a stink of burning. They were the children of Abraham, of Moses and David and Solomon. They were all coming to the Shadowlands, and no one knew why. So the fact that that passage is in that book years ahead of time just goes to show Charnel Houses of Europe was handled with the utmost care. It was not rushed. So, chapter by chapter breakdown, it begins with an introduction, who will tell the children, and right in the introduction, they kind of lay out the seriousness of the tone of this book, that, okay, you've read other Wraith the Oblivion supplement books, you're gonna have fun with this role-playing game. Charnel Houses of Europe, the introduction is like, stop. Take a breath. You need to be ready for the material we are about to cover. And I feel that that kind of seriousness, the kind of gravity that the introduction has, it's different than other role-playing supplements of, hi, thanks, welcome to our book, I hope you enjoy it. Like, Charnel Houses of Europe does not have that. And I think that tone is very needed. It kind of puts the brakes on I don't want to say the enthusiasm of reading this book. I was enthusiastic to read this book at first. I will get to that. But it just kind of brings it into a human lens, a human scope, and just kind of delivers the gravity of the information contained in this book. After that is some opening fiction by Robert Hatch. It's brief. It's like one page. It's 2 half pages. Then there is the introduction. The introduction really, as much as the foreword, the introduction kind of lays out what the book is and what the book is not. And more importantly, I feel like in the introduction, they lay out why. Why did we write this book? Why are we having this discussion? The next chapter chronicles the history of the Holocaust and a little bit of World War II in general, just in a broad stroke sense, starting with January 30th, 1933, and ending with the arrest and trial of Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem in 1961. So there's something they do in the chapter Chronicle of Millions that I really, really like. Because this is a role-playing supplement, there are certain aspects of Wraith the Oblivion that are fantasy. They're in the underworld, the other side of the shroud. All of that fantastical fictional stuff is in black sidebars with white text, whereas the actual story of the Holocaust is told black text on white paper. So it's very, very stark. It's right there in black and white that some of this book, very, very small portions of this book, they talk about the fantasy world, but the rest of it reads like an actual history book. It is reality. It actually happened. They don't bullshit any of it. And when I got my hands on this book as a teenager, I got like halfway through the Chronicles of Millions chapter, and that was the point where I had to put the book down and walk away. And a book had never done that to me before. I had never felt such an overwhelming amount of anguish, of hurt, of despair in reading a simple book than Charnel Houses of Europe did to me, particularly in the Chronicles of Millions chapter. The other chapter that would do that to me is the chapter on Auschwitz-Birkenau, but we will get to that. At the age that I got this book, I had never read quite how brutal the Holocaust was. Confession time, I was under 18 when I got this book. This book is printed on the Black Dog label, meaning adults only content. I had heard of this book as a teenager, and I asked my father, I want to buy a certain book, but I have to be over 18 to buy it. He asked me one question and one question only. He said, is it pornography? I said, no, it's a really graphic book on the Holocaust. And he said, okay. I gave him cash. He put it on his credit card. It got delivered to him. He gave me the book when it came in. And at age probably 16, 17 years old, I was very excited to get my hands on it. And especially because we had read about the Holocaust in school years earlier, but not to this extent, not to this level of harsh reality and brutal seriousness. And never before has a book hurt me in such a way. So it was from the Chronicles of Millions chapter onward that I had to read the book in very, very short bursts, because that was pretty much all I could take. And it was a tough read, but it was, and continues to be, a very worthwhile one. The subsequent chapters go over the ghettos at Theresienstadt, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Warsaw, and the mass graves at Babi Yar. And finally, they save the worst for last, Auschwitz-Birkenau, which at the height of that camp's operation was nothing short of a murder factory. Charnel Houses of Europe, the Shoah. Cover to cover is not a very thick book, but it is a very dense book. It was a very thought-provoking, gut-wrenching, emotional read. It is certainly not for everyone. I would certainly recommend reading it as a book, especially if you're interested in the history, the human side of history. As a role-playing supplement, I'm probably never going to use it in-game, but it is a title that I'm really glad I picked up, and I'm glad that I read it, and I will continue to reread it every once in a while. So at the back of the book, on what would essentially be page 127, is a one-sheet that is kind of, for lack of a better term, I guess it's kind of a mission statement from Black Dog Games themselves. And again, I read this book when I was a teenager, and so I actually want to talk about this one page because they, first off, I don't think any other review goes over this page. They ask a particular question on that page that I've thought about for many a project throughout my entire life. They ask the question, yeah, but is it art? They talk about all of these things, and it's like, yeah, but is it art? They even mention other Black Dog role-playing supplements. They mention Hole, human-occupied landfill, which is not a World of Darkness supplement. It's more of a futuristic splatterpunk, cyberpunk kind of thing. And it's unique, I think, among role-playing games in that the entire core book is handwritten. There's 3 dudes that wrote this book, and they all have distinctive handwriting. And every page is handwritten. So, that came from Black Dog, yeah. But is it art? Other Black Dog titles that I've picked up is Clan Book Bali for Vampire the Dark Ages. This is a book that loves to revel in how absolutely vile it is. Yeah, but is it art? And finally, another supplement I have is Freak Legion, A Player's Guide to Fomori. This is probably the most fun splatterpunk book that White Wolf has put out. Yeah, but is it art? And then there's Charnel Houses of Europe, the Shoah. Charnel Houses stands apart from its other Black Dog brethren as a much more mature, thoughtful, older sibling. Whereas other Black Dog supplements, like I said, they kind of revel in how vile they are. Charnel Houses is a lot more thoughtful. It's a lot more methodical. It is still gruesome. It is still violent. You need to be ready for that, which is why it's in the Black Dog game print line. But is it art? What exactly is art? How does one define what art is? One could define art as a piece of physical media meant to evoke an emotion in its viewer. One could define art as a piece of physical media meant to convey an idea or a feeling from one person to another. So while other Black Dog books may or may not be considered art pieces, Charnel Houses of Europe, I read this book and I feel things. I feel sad. I feel crushed. I feel disheartened. I feel disgusted. I feel angry. I feel outraged. And I feel motivated, which is part of why I'm doing this review. More so than any other role-playing supplement, more so than anything else White Wolf has put out, more so than any of the other books that I've mentioned in this review, these books that I've pulled off to the side, more so than anything else in the Wraith the Oblivion game line, or just White Wolf in general, Charnel Houses of Europe, the Shoah, makes me feel things and makes me think about things long after I put this book down. And if that isn't art, I don't know what is. From a critical standpoint, I would give Charnel Houses of Europe, the Shoah, like either 4.5 out of 5 or 9.5 out of 10. I'm deducting half a point collectively for 2 reasons, and they're very, very small, fickle reasons. Number one, the opening fiction, I didn't really like it. Sorry. It's a very small criticism, so that's why I'm like, quarter of a point, half a point. And half a point for some of the maps are misprinted. I think you can find corrected maps online. With a little bit of research, you could actually find maps of these areas if you were to use this as a roleplay supplement. But again, if you were going to use it as a roleplay supplement, you would have to do that extra step. There was a printing error on some of the maps. So for the opening fiction and the misprinted maps, very small qualms. Collectively, I will deduct half a point. So 4.5 out of 5 or 9.5 out of 10 for Charnel Houses of Europe, the Shoah. So this concludes my first book review on this channel. So some of you may be thinking, why Charnel Houses of Europe, the Shoah, of all titles? Why now? Why review this book at all? 28, almost 29 years after the fact. Why not wait for the 30th anniversary? Because honestly, I wanted to review this book because I look around at the American political environment in January of 2026, and yeah, I feel like there's still a lot of lessons to be had from the Holocaust. I feel like people don't really take it seriously. I feel like there's still lessons we need to learn from history. I feel like there's a new age of like Nazi fetishism that I don't know where it came from, and I don't know why it's here, but it shouldn't be here. Granted, Nazi fetishism is nothing new. Like, Nazis have always been the perfect bad guys in media, and there's actual Nazi worship. And I'm seeing a lot of Nazi fetishism, and it's frankly very, very disgusting and very disrespectful. And it's very disheartening that in the year 2026, we are still fucking dealing with this. So that was my motivation for rereading this book. And like I mentioned before, I go through a plethora of emotions. I go from sadness to despair to disgust to anger to wanting to make a change. So that's why I'm doing this review. After all these years, this book still hits like a solid gut punch. And sadly, it's still relevant. We still haven't learned to respect the dead as much as we should. So yeah, that's all I've got for today. Normally at the end of my videos, I do this whole spiel of I'm Horrorman Mike, like and subscribe, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to say for today, I'm Horrorman Mike, and I urge you to enjoy the life you have while you still have it, and above all else, please, please be good to each other. Thank you.